So in this video, I wanted to give you a little sort of tour around R so that you can get familiar with what these different interfaces look like and kind of what R does before we do anything more complicated. So at its fundamental level, R could be thought of like a calculator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work down here in this what's called a console. And I'm going to show you that R can be used as a calculator. So for example, if I add 1 plus 2, okay, 1, 2, and then hit enter, you'll see R will tell me out that the answer is 3. And if I do something a little more complicated, like 1 times 2, R will put out for me again, the answer is just as a calculator would, that the answer would be 2. And so R, in its fundamental way, can act as a calculator. R can also do maybe something that simple calculators can't do, and it can remember certain values. So for example, let's pretend that I wanted to remember a value, and so I wanted to call this value x, and I wanted to remember its value as the number 4. Okay, so if you want to tell R to remember a value, what you do is you give that value a name. So usually that's like x or y, or right, you give it some sort of name. I'm calling this one x. And then you point this arrow, okay, towards x, and you say, okay, R, I want you to basically put 4 into what x is. So when I ask you what x is, you will tell me that it's 4. And so when you do that and you hit enter, what you'll see is that up here in the upper right-hand corner, R remembers now that x is a number, right? So you see that it's saying it's numeric. And it's remembering that its number is 4. So if I come back here and I say, hey, R, tell me what x plus 2 is. Careful here. Tell me what x plus 2 is. You'll see it comes out as 6. And if I ask it, a value that I haven't assigned, like let's say I ask it for y's value. Well, let's say, okay, I don't know what y is. You haven't told me that yet. Okay, so I could tell it a value of y. I could give it a value y. I could say y is going to be x plus 3. And there's a small typo here. I need to make it a full arrow. When I do that, again, this is telling R, I want you to call something new called y, and I want you to remember it as x plus 3. And R will remember x's value was 4. And so 4 plus 3, it will assign y to be 7. And if you see up here, y is going to be remembered as 7. And if I wanted y to be remembered as something else, maybe I wanted y to be remembered as 8, I could change it as well. So what I did there is I assigned y to 8, and you can see y is up here is now 8. And so one way you can use R is just down here in the console, running individual commands. But for our purposes, this is going to be problematic because if you leave R and come back, all your work here may or may not be there, and you want a nice sort of way to save your files, share them with your friends, etc. You don't want to be doing it always like this. Okay, you want a kind of a nicer, systematic way of doing things. And so that's where I want to navigate up here into this window. So if you don't have something up here yet, we're going to make something called a script. So let's suppose you didn't have anything there and your screen looked like this. Okay, suppose there's nothing there. You would hit new file, and you would say R script. Okay, and when you do that, it should probably come up with saying, oh, untitled number 1. Okay, so if you had nothing there, or it was already there as untitled 1, that might be what it looks like. And what this is going to do is it's basically going to give us a script. Like you can think about how there's a script for actors, like in a movie or something like that, that we give R a listing of sort of commands to remember to run again and again in the future. So one thing we could do is we could just put our basic commands up there again, like let's put 1 plus 2 up there. Okay, and if I hit 1 plus 2, and by the way, to run this actual line of code now, so down here I was just pressing enter, but up here to run this, I'm holding both control and hitting enter. Okay, so I put my cursor at the end of line, I hit control and enter, and what you're seeing is every time I do that, that command 1 plus 2 is getting kind of taken from my script and being performed down here. So you see it spit out 3 each time that I was talking about. That to run a line, you do control and enter. Okay, and if maybe you're on a Mac or something like that, maybe it's command enter or something similar. But this is how you can remember the line. So notice that, 1 plus 2 stays here, whereas down here, right, my cursor moves down to a new line. Here, it stayed here. I could run it again very easily if I wanted to. And again, you can do multiple lines. So we could do 5 times 6, and I could, right, not even run that line to start. I could just go to a new line. So I'm just hitting enter. I'm not hitting control enter. And I could put another line of code down. I could put maybe 2 to the 3rd power. And then I could go back up to 5 times 6, and I could hit control enter, and you'll see it spits out 30. And then I can do control enter again on this 2 to the 3rd, and you can see it spits out 8. And so here I'm just basically using it as a calculator, and nothing more complicated than that. Now, sometimes in R, you would like the opportunity to kind of make notes. So, each one of these lines of code actually did something, right? They produced some numbers in the output down here. But sometimes you just want notes that don't actually do that. And so one way you can make notes is what's called comments. So a comment, you use a hashtag or a pound sign, depending on how old you are, but this hashtag or pound sign as, and you can put a comment. So here I'll say, this is an example of a comment. It does nothing to your code other than help keep you organized. So you'll notice that if I try to run maybe control enter at the end of one of these lines, right, it kind of spits out the comment, but it's not actually doing anything, right? It's doing the next line, the 1 plus 2, right? So this doesn't interfere at all with me being able to run these calculations. It's just kind of a remember, just a note that I can have. And like we said, R can store R stores variables using this sort of arrow. And what's really important is we don't want to use spaces when making variables. Okay, you don't want to use spaces. Or just numbers, maybe, when making variables. So what I mean by that is that a good variable name might be like X, right? So assigning X the name of like 4, saying X represents 4. That's perfectly fine. What might not be fine is like calling a new variable and trying to assign that the value of 4. You'll see that it says there's an unexpected symbol. And what that unexpected symbol is this space. So it doesn't like when you give variable names spaces, and it's kind of bad practice to call like a variable 3, or like, 3A or something like that. It's kind of bad practice. So, you might say my new variable, like you might spell something out with underscores, and that's okay. You might assign that a value of 2, right? And you see that I still even have Y up here from before, right? You can see Y is still up here. And we have this my new variable is a value of 2. And again, you can sort of play with these, right? I could reassign Y's value as being X plus my new variable. And when I do that, you can see Y's new value is 6. And you can see again, right, as I'm doing control enter at the end of these lines, right? We're seeing the scripts actually being run down here. So R has different types of variables. So there are different types of variables in R. So this is just a note to kind of remind you. So one example of figuring out the type of a variable is you can type of typof, and then put some parentheses, open, close, and go ahead and put in this variable X we've been talking about. Now, if you remember up here, X represents 4, and it'll tell you X is a double. So it's kind of reminding you when it says double, what it's trying to remind you of is it's reminding you that this is kind of a number. Okay, so double might not look like it's saying number, but there are reasons why it says this. But this kind of indicates to us that this is a number. There are other kinds of variables. So let me make a new variable. So a new variable. Sometimes you want variables to not represent numbers, but to represent words. So like, let's make some quotes, and I'll put a word in there. I'll put the word eagle. And you'll see when I ran that line, a new variable was made. right? And its value is eagle in quotes. And if I ask R to tell me the type of that variable, and you'll see sometimes R will kind of auto-complete this for you, so you don't have to type it all the way. So that's kind of nice. You can just click on that. And I run that line. R will tell me that that's a character. So, eagle is not a number, it's characters. And so it puts it as that. So these are two sort of basic types of variables. You'll also see variables together in a list, or you'll see, you'll see objects from R put together in lists. So you can put together items into a list. So, another way of thinking about a list, you might hear it called a vector. These are technically a little different things, but what I mean is you might say, oh, let's make my new vector. So I'm going to make a new vector. And what that can do is that can hold multiple numbers. So that could hold like the numbers 3, 9, and 10. And to tell R that I want you to keep these things in a vector, I put this little C here, which means concatenate or kind of glue together, and glue together the numbers 3, 9, 10 in that order. And you'll see over here when I run that line, my new vector is a new variable that's been generated, and it has values 3, 9, and 10. And if I wanted to maybe get some of the numbers out of there, so I said my new vector, I could ask with square brackets, what's the first thing in my new vector? And it would tell me out the first thing in your new vector is 3. Or I could say in my new vector, not my new variable, my new vector, what's the third thing in there? It will say the third thing in there is 10. So it's remembering the order that these are kept in. And you can also grab out multiple things at once. So I could say, what is the second through the third? So to say through, I provide a colon. And it will say, well, the second and third things in your list are 9 and 10. So it'll remember those things. And you could make a string vector if you wanted to. So your string vector might look like, let's put my name, and then let's put another person's name, and let's put a third name. So just putting together, and you can see vectors can also hold characters. So these are character variables that can be accessed. So this is the basic way in which you can kind of write commands in R. And, instead of having to type 1 plus 2 again, you could go up here and you could hit Control Enter and it would run 1 plus 2. Right. So the nice thing about R is that you can run things in a certain order. Now, every time you come back to this file, I encourage you to start from the top and run files one line at a time. So Control Enter all the way down. Or if you want a faster way, you can highlight everything. So you can hit Control A and you can hit Run, and it will run all of your lines at once. And it's really, really, really good practice with R to save your files before you're done. So go ahead and hit save. So there's a little save icon here. And depending on where you want to save things, you can adjust your folder system up here. So I would call this basics. And you'll see it's already generating for me basics because I already have that file named. But you would just type whatever name you want. Again, this is a good place not to leave spaces or numbers. I would call this one word or use underscores, and save your file there so that next time when you come back, you can just load that file. So, for example, let's say I wanted to call this basics second version, okay, because I had already made one. You'll see that it names it basics second version. And if I went ahead and closed this, I could go to file and I could hit open file. And I could click on basic second version. And when I do that, you'll see that it brings us back up. Okay, so it's good practice to have those things saved so that you don't lose access to them and you can come back to them at other times. And the last thing I want to mention is just kind of cleaning up your work system. So if you ever want to get rid of this stuff down here, you can go ahead and hit the broom and it'll clean that up. If you want to clean the stuff that's up here, you can go ahead and hit the broom. Be careful. So, if you get rid of this stuff, so if I get rid of all this, I get rid of the broom, right? It says, are you sure you want to get rid of everything? I'll hit yes. But if I ask, what is the value of X? It'll say, I don't know what X is anymore. And that's because you just got rid of it. So you could go back in here and remind it X is 4 and then type X again and it'll remember now. Just be careful, right, when you erase stuff that you might have to rerun lines. Be careful of that.